BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Coming up from the BBC World Service, The Interview. Conversations with the people shaping our world with me, Daniel Daze, senior journalist with focus on Africa. For this episode, I speak to Dr. Nyaradzayi Gumbunzanda, UN Deputy Executive Director for Women, on the need for African leaders to move money away from war and into clean water and sanitation.
Africa is flowing with resources, oil, diamonds, critical minerals. But at times we find that in our cities, at the bus stations, there's no toilets with running water in a country which is rich with possibilities. So it's how that intentionality, that political will to put resources to what matters most. How much is Africa spending on military, on wars? Those millions of dollars can go to water and sanitation, can go to education and to healthcare. So it's about prioritization.
Nyaradzayi Gumbunzanda. Hear more on The Interview after the news.
BBC News with Linda Hardy. The US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said the US is carrying out a devastating mission in Iran aimed at destroying its missiles, its navy and its nuclear ambitions. In a briefing at the Pentagon, Mr. Hegseth said Washington had realistic ambitions and the operation would not lead to an endless war, but refused to give a time frame.
The former regime had every chance to make a peaceful and sensible deal, but Tehran was not negotiating. They were stalling, buying time to reload their missile stockpiles and restart their nuclear ambitions. Their goal, hold us hostage, threatening to strike our forces. President Trump doesn't play those games.
The head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Ali Larijani, said his country would fiercely defend itself and make its enemies sorry for what he called their miscalculation. US and Israeli strikes are continuing to hit the Iranian capital for a third day. Israel's military said it was carrying out more strikes on regime targets in Tehran, with huge explosions reported in the city. Local news sources say several more commanders have been killed. 6 Gulf states alongside the US have described Iran's targeting of non-combatant countries in the region as a dangerous escalation. A statement said they reaffirmed their right to self-defense. As our chief international correspondent Lise Doucette explains, the conflict seems to be expanding.
From the beginning, both the United States and Israel have tried to make the case that this was a preemptive strike, that Iran was about to attack one of them imminently, and yet they haven't really made the case convincingly, and there is no evidence that there was about to be a direct attack from the United States. But it's in full flow now, and as was expected, but it's happening at speed, the widening of that conflict.
Global oil and gas prices have risen sharply, with producers, insurers and shipping firms affected by war and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The cost of European gas has soared after the world's largest producer of liquefied natural gas, Qatar Energy, said it was halting production. Darshini David has more details.
It's not just about that disruption to production itself, but also the transport of liquid gas and oil. About a fifth of each of those, the world supply, comes through the Straits of Hormuz, this waterway where traffic is practically at a standstill right now. So if we look at where we are, crude oil prices up by about 7%, gas futures up by about 50%. It sounds eye-watering, show-stopping numbers once again. Having said that, we are not looking at a rerun so far of what we saw in the war in Ukraine.
Israeli strikes have again hit parts of the Lebanese capital, with plumes of smoke rising above Beirut's southern suburbs. The IDF has threatened to strike targets linked to the Iranian proxy Hezbollah. World News from the BBC. A small number of flights have taken off from Abu Dhabi's international airport after being suspended because of the conflict in the region. The tracking service Flight Radar 24 shows that Etihad Airways planes have left for destinations including London, Moscow, Paris, Cairo and Delhi. The airline said any flights would be subject to strict operational and safety approvals. In other news, Zimbabwe has begun releasing nearly 4,000 inmates granted presidential amnesty in February as part of efforts to ease congestion in the country's prisons. The Justice Minister says 223 women are among those set to benefit. The authorities in South Sudan say almost 170 people have been killed in the Ruweng administrative area near the border with Sudan. The information minister says 82 of the victims were civilians, most of them women and children. Alfred Lastek reports.
Ruweng Information Minister James Mijok said armed youth linked to the opposition set fire to homes and markets during 3 hours of fighting on Sunday. Most of the victims were civilians, but some local officials were killed. Mr. Mijok said government forces had driven the attackers out. The victims had to be buried in mass graves because of the large number of casualties. The opposition denies any connection with the violence. The UN says it's alarmed by the surge in violence over the weekend.
A long-lost painting by the Dutch master Rembrandt has been traced and authenticated by the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. The whereabouts of the 1633 work entitled Visions of Zacharias in the Temple had been unknown for 65 years, but researchers have now confirmed that a painting recently handed over to the Rijksmuseum for testing is the missing masterpiece. It depicts the biblical story of Zacharias' visit by the angel Gabriel. And that's the world news from the BBC.
Hello, I'm Daniel Daze, the BBC's senior journalist with the Focus on Africa podcast, and this is the interview from the BBC World Service, the best conversations coming out of the BBC, people shaping our world from all over the world.
If you're not a little bit afraid, then you're not paying attention.
We have never seen a people so united.
Do not make that boat crossing. Do not make that journey.
Being born in America, feeling American, having people treat me like I'm not.
We're more popular than populism.
For this interview, I met Nyawadzayi Gumbonzanda, United Nations Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director for Women at the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The theme of the AU for 2026 is ensuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems. It's part of Agenda 2063, the organization's 50-year strategic framework. But as you will hear, for Gumbonzanda, these things can't wait 50 years. They need to be a priority for African leaders now. And in her role as deputy lead for UN Women, she has been meeting with the women of Sudan and hearing their stories of rape and displacement. The women and children, she says, continue to be the worst affected, and a ceasefire is urgently needed.
It's a scar on humanity for us to continue to have the situation we have in Sudan. Peace is possible. This continent experienced colonialism and slavery. For centuries, our people were being trafficked out of Africa. For centuries, countries, including my own, was under colonial rule. But peace arrived in some of our countries because discussions and negotiations became a priority. The Sudan today needs a solid political solution to stop the guns and for people to go back home and for mothers to heal from the rape and the atrocities, for the children to go back to school, to have hope. As humanity, we owe and we have a responsibility to Sudan at this moment for peace.
Welcome to the interview from the BBC World Service with Nyawadzayi Gumbonzanda.
As UN women, we realize that when a woman or a little girl wakes up every day, they start by having to wash their hands, provide for the family. And that's where the first success lies. Quality, accessible, clean water for everyday care responsibilities. That's the first. And that's not where we are as yet. So we really, really appreciate that the African Union could put the issue of water and sanitation at the heart of its theme of this year. Success for us is also recognizing that water is not just about household care. It's not just about community livelihoods. It is also about the economy. It is about the women on the market who, when she wakes up every day, wants to spread their tomatoes. She may be having a period, wants to make sure that there's sanitation on that market. So it's also about how we are able to give access that reduces disease. And we know the roles and responsibilities that that women have, but also it's about the young girls, it's about the